Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 336. In this episode, we're continuing our journey through the Fall of Númenor by considering the curious case of Silmarion, the eldest child of Tar Elendil. Before we get started, I'd like to give a double up air five to our amazing fellowship. 3, 2, 1. Whoops, gotta get my hands up there. There we go. 3, 2, 1. Whoopsh. Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, Jacob Lockham, John H., Melkor27, and KG. Also, a shout out to those celebrating their fellowship anniversary in April and May of 2023. Jonathan D., Julia, KDP, Rebecca R., Ty M., John H., Michael W., Malcolm C. Thank you all so much for sticking with us over the last year. Join the Fellowship of the Road by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. When you join the Fellowship of the Road, it helps us to keep on evering on and land you some cool perks along the way. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad. I seem to be a little bit tongue-tied this evening. I'm recording this, in the evening, so perhaps the old mouth is getting a little tired. I don't know, but hopefully I can get through this one without flubbing up too many things. Hit that like button. Oh, this is for YouTube. There we go again, just all mistakes. YouTube, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below. Need to practice my Micro Machine Guy commentary so I can get all the words out quickly. Anybody, you guys remember Micro Machines? Yeah, man, I haven't seen those commercials. I remember those commercials from being a kid. That guy could talk so fast. Wow. All right. In Appendix B of Lord of the Rings, we get this curious entry. 521. Birth in Númenor of Silmarion. Now, when I first read this, I immediately thought, who is Silmarion, and why does her birth warrant one of the few entries in the timeline of the Second Age, right? There's really, like, in most editions, there's about 2 pages of entries for the timeline of the Second Age. And one of them goes to the birth of this person, Silmarion. So what gives? We don't know really anything else about her from the timeline, and really don't know much else about her from Lord of the Rings. So why is she called out here specifically, her birth? Well, it turns out that she was, in fact, a very important figure in the history of the Second and Third Ages, whose life would lead to huge repercussions all the way through events of the Lord of the Rings. But before we learn about Silmarion, let's consider her father, Elendil. So, this very short entry in the Fall of Númenor pulls from a few different sources. We already mentioned Appendix B of Lord of the Rings, The Lost Road, and Unfinished Tales. And there's a couple of things going on here. So we'll get to Silmarion a little later in the episode, but let's talk about her father, Elendil. Now, you probably know the name Elendil if you're watching this listening to this podcast, watching us on YouTube. You probably know that name. But this is not the Elendil you're thinking of. This is not the Elendil you're thinking of. This is a distant ancestor of the Elendil of the Rings of Power, right? This Elendil is the 4th king of Númenor. He is Tar Elendil, who ascended to the throne of Númenor in the year 590, Second Age 590, and ruled for 150 years. The Elendil of the show The Rings of Power, the one that becomes a founding father, if you will, of Gondor and Arnor, he does not come along until a couple of millennia later. He is descended from Elendil, from this Elendil, Tar Elendil, but he does not come along until many millennia later, until 2 millennia later, so many centuries later. Interestingly enough, Tar Elendil's father here is Tar Amandil, and we get Amandil is the father of Elendil in the later version, the later iteration. So the names then harken back to these names, and we are going to learn maybe why that is, right? Why they would want to harken back to these particular kings and their naming of those 2 figures. So just again to clarify, this is not Isildur's father nor the Elendil that features in the Rings of Power. However, it is the original Elendil and the father of Silmarion. There's a double meaning of the name Elendil. First of all, it means star lover, and second of all, it means elf friend. Elin is Quenya for star, and Dil is lover or a friend. Both Quenya terms, and you combine them and you get star lover, and kind of by extension elf friend, because the elves were the people of the stars. So that's the meaning of the name Elendil. He is the elf friend, but he is also the star lover, right? Also called Elendil is also called Parmaite per this passage, meaning book handy. Let me say that again. Parmaite, meaning book handy, for he made many books and legends of the lore gathered by his grandfather Vardamir. I'm going to make my notes a little larger here so I don't have to strain too much to see him. All right, there we go. So yes, he takes after his grandfather Tar Vardamir. Now you might remember Vardamir was the son of Elros, and he reigned according to the records for only 1 year, but in reality he didn't really reign at all. He immediately upon the passing of Elros, he immediately handed over the throne to his son Amandil, right? So but Elendil, Tar Elendil here, takes after his grandfather Tar Vardamir in temperament. He is a lore master like Vardamir, and this kind of reiterates this theme of ruling rulers and learned rulers, and we're going to see this again with a couple of more rulers, kind of father-son relationships, if you will, are going on here. So you have some of these rulers who are more focused on, I want to learn about lore. They're not really so much men of action. But then you have certain rulers who are more like, they're kind of what you think about a king should be, right? Like, executive authority and just kind of that aura of rulership and action, right? So Elendil had 3 children. The daughter Silmariën, all right, a daughter Isilme, and a son, Meneldur, who becomes Tar Meneldur, the 5th king of Númenor. Elendil ruled until Second Age 740 and died in Second Age 751. So a rule of, oh goodness, that's not right. So I had 750 years, but I think it's actually 150 years. And the age of 401 at death. All right, so he lived for 401 years. You'll notice, again, just to reiterate what we've talked about in the last few episodes, he abdicated his throne in 740 and lived 11 more years afterwards. So by now it was kind of this established thing that the king would try to pass along the throne to his son, to the next ruler, while he was still alive, right? But while he was still kind of with it enough to do so peacefully, right? And it's, there's a lot of reasons for this, but one of the signs, one reason it's a sign of just the willingness to hand over power, right? That the power is not really about the person, but it's about the office, right? It's about the role that the king or the monarch or the ruler plays, not so much the power. Okay. All right. So that is Elendil, Tar Elendil, the father of Silmariën. Now let's talk about Silmariën. All right. So Silmariën, born in 521. She is the first daughter and eldest child of Tar Elendil, Númenor's 4th king. Her name comes from Quenya, with the roots Silma for silver or shining white, and the feminine Rien, which is a variant of Riel, as in Galadriel. So we have something like maiden garlanded with shining light. The name almost sounds like a play on the word Silmaril. She must have been pretty special in her father's eyes, right? So, I don't know about you all, but when I first saw this name, it immediately made me think of like, wow, is this like the Maiden of the Silmarils or something like that? Like she's named after the Silmarils. So I think her name is definitely intended to allude to that. With her birth, there's a new problem for Númenor. Should the throne pass to the eldest child of the king, even if it's a daughter? And at this point, the answer is no. Per Tolkien Gateway, this is called agnatic primogeniture or patrilineal primogeniture. All right. Now, it might sound like a very simple concept, but you can actually dig into those concepts, and it's actually the different ways that different societies have done, the inheritance and the kind of the lines of descent, and who the throne should come to next, and all this kind of stuff. It gets pretty complex, right? Especially when you get further and further down the line. Uh, I had a friend when I was younger who claimed to have identified he was like the 42nd in line to be the Duke of like something in England. Now I don't know if that's true or not, but he made it like he kind of made it this little point of identity that he would use somewhat ironically, that he was the 42nd Duke of something or other in England. He knew exactly what it was, of course. Now so, but you do, like with the we recently saw a new monarch crowned in England, and there are kind of like different rules like about how that works. If it wasn't going to be just the eldest child of the most recent monarch, who would it be? So these questions, it's actually a pretty interesting topic. But in Numenor at this point, uh, it's not going to be the eldest child. Just if it's a daughter, it's going to be the oldest son. All right. And obviously, that can cause some conflict, right? We don't know if per se if Silmarion felt jilted by this. We don't really get any records of how she took that personally. But we know that probably some people, were just kind of like, hey, why not Silmarion as the queen, right? As the ruling queen. Now this will change a few generations down the line, and they will allow for daughters to become the rulers, and as it passes on, but not at this point. So perhaps what's most important about Silmarion, and the reason she finds this place in Appendix B, is that with her the line of the lords of Andunië begins. So Tar Elendil creates the title in honor of Silmarion's firstborn son, Valandil. And why Andunië? Because this was where she and her husband, Elaton, would reside, and their descendants afterwards. Remember that Andunië was the great Númenorian city on the western coast, the one that faced the Blessed Realm. Later, as Númenor drifts away from its friendship with Aman and the elves, this line maintains it as a remnant of sorts. And from this line will come Elendil and Isildur, legitimate heirs of the Númenorian throne, though we will return to that later. But, you kind of tie it back, go back long enough, and you see how that works. Now, I don't know that Tolkien ever maps that out specifically and says this is why they are, but we do have later on that it's introduced that women can become monarchs, so you kind of follow the logic there, and even though this split off in the line of inheriting the throne happened so far back in distant past of Numenor's history, it can still come all the way back. It traces all the way back, and we find Elendil and Isildur as legitimate heirs to the Númenorian throne, and consequently, Aragorn, right? Aragorn will be also a legitimate heir. So that is kind of the big picture on Silmarion, like why she is mentioned here in Appendix B of the Lord of the Rings. This is a very, very short entry, but even with this, we see a good bit is packed in here. I do believe that this pencil sketch here is of Silmarion. And just a little quick note of erratum. According to my old copy of Return of the King here, Appendix B, Silmarion is born in, let's see here. Get back. There we go. I was looking at the Third Age. Appendix B, Second Age. Silmarion's birth, according to this one, is 548. But in fact, Christopher later discovered that this was just a mistake by his father, and he'd actually written that Silmarion pretty well established that she was born in 521. So if you have an older copy of Lord of the Rings, it might say 548 for the year of her birth, but 521 is actually the year of her birth. That has been established by Christopher. All right. So, like I said, I hope you enjoyed learning about Silmarion and the Lords of Andunië. While this may have been a short entry, with Tolkien, even a few words can pack a whole lot of importance. All right. Well, hey, Please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or the platform of your choice. If you are a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for the show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us to keep on evering on. All right, and hey, keep that correspondence coming. None today, but hope to do some on the next episode. All right, well, thank you to our amazing patrons, especially the following: John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, Jacob Lockham, John H., Melkor27, KG, Emilio P., Jonathan D., Mike M., Robert H., Paul D., Julia, Werty, JoeBagelMan, Richard K., Matt R., Matthew W., Garret P., Chris K., John W., Eugene D., Chris B., Daniel S., Seb M., Shana Supreme, Cory C., Ms. Anonymous, Andrew T., Redhawk, Shannon S., Brian O., Zeke F., James L., Chris L., Asya V., Ish of the Hammer, Teresa C., David of Pints with Jack, and Eric B. Thank you all so much for your support. We really appreciate you and all of our fellowship. And thanks to everybody for watching and or listening. We will talk at you next time. Bye-bye.